The dust-stained letter trembled in Lillian Graves's hands as she watched her 5-year-old son struggle for breath in the small, dilapidated cabin they called home. The Arizona Territory of 1878 showed no mercy to a widow with a sick child and empty cupboards. Lillian gently placed the back of her hand against Timothy's forehead. The fever had worsened since morning, his small chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The coughing fits that racked his tiny frame had grown more frequent, leaving him exhausted and weak. Their situation was dire. Her husband Thomas had been dead for over a year, killed in a mining accident that had left her with nothing but this run-down cabin on the outskirts of Fort McDowell. "Mama," Timothy whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm hungry." Lillian fought back tears. "I know, sweetheart. Rest now. Mama will find something." She tucked the threadbare blanket around his shoulders and moved to the kitchen area. Opening the cupboard revealed exactly what she already knew: nothing but an empty flour sack and a few dried beans, not enough to make even a small meal. The winter had been harsh in the Arizona Territory, and spring wasn't bringing the relief she'd hoped for. Her small garden had failed due to unexpected late frosts, and the sewing work she took in from townsfolk had dwindled as people tightened their belts during hard times. Desperation pushed Lillian toward the door. She couldn't sit by and watch her son waste away. After ensuring Timothy was as comfortable as possible, she placed a kiss on his hot forehead. "I'll be back soon, my love. Try to sleep." The walk into Fort McDowell was nearly 3 miles, but Lillian hardly noticed the distance as worry for Timothy consumed her thoughts. The town had grown considerably since the Army established the fort in 1865. Now a bustling community had formed around it, with merchants, saloons, and even a small church where she occasionally found work cleaning. As she approached Main Street, Lillian straightened her worn dress and tucked stray strands of auburn hair beneath her bonnet. Pride was a luxury she could ill afford, but dignity was something she clung to fiercely. Her steps took her directly to Henderson's General Store, where she had occasionally bartered her sewing skills for goods. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and Mr. Henderson looked up from behind the counter. His expression softened when he recognized her. "Mrs. Graves, good afternoon to you." "Mr. Henderson." Lillian nodded, twisting her hands nervously in her apron. "I was wondering if you might have any work for me. My boy, Timothy, he's taken ill with a fever and a terrible cough. I need to get some food and medicine for him." The storekeeper's face fell. "I'm mighty sorry to hear about the boy, Mrs. Graves. Truth is, business has been slow and I've nothing extra needing doing." He hesitated. "Perhaps I could advance you a small bit of credit." Lillian's cheeks burned with embarrassment. I already owe you from winter, sir. I couldn't possibly." "Madam, a sick child needs tending. Let me put together some supplies for you." The deep voice came from behind her, and Lillian turned to find herself looking up at a tall stranger. His clothes were trail-worn but of good quality: dark trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered vest. A cowboy's hat hung from his fingers, and his face bore the weathered look of a man who'd spent years under the punishing western sun. "I don't accept charity, sir," Lillian said quietly, though her empty stomach and the thought of Timothy's hungry face made her words ring hollow. The man's blue eyes studied her face for a moment. "Not offering charity, madam. I'm offering a fair trade. I heard you mention sewing. My shirts could use mending, and I've lost most of my buttons." He gestured to his shirt where, indeed, 2 buttons were missing. Lillian hesitated. The stranger was offering her a way to accept help without sacrificing her pride. "Owen Archer," he said, extending his hand. "Just arrived in town yesterday." "Lillian Graves," she replied, briefly taking his calloused hand. My cabin's a ways out of town. I can take your shirts with me and bring them back when they're mended. No rush, Mrs. Graves. Owen turned to the storekeeper. Mr. Henderson, would you please gather what the lady needs for her boy, medicine, food, the essentials? He reached into his pocket and pulled out several coins. Mr. Henderson nodded. Doc Simmons left some fever tonic just yesterday. Should help the little one. As the storekeeper gathered supplies, Lillian found herself studying the cowboy. He wasn't young, perhaps mid-30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting against the sun, and a quiet confidence in his movements that suggested experience in the saddle. "You're very kind, Mr. Archer," Lillian said softly. "I'll have your shirts mended properly, I promise." Owen simply nodded, his expression unreadable. "How far is your cabin, Mrs. Graves?" "About 3 miles east of town," his brow furrowed. "That's a fair distance to carry these supplies. I'd be happy to help you get them home." Before Lillian could protest, Mr. Henderson returned with a basket filled with goods: bread, dried meat, beans, sugar, coffee, a small bottle of fever tonic, and even a jar of preserved peaches. The sight of such bounty after months of scarcity brought tears to her eyes. "I can't possibly accept all this," she whispered. "The boy needs strength to fight off illness," Owen said firmly. "And you'll need strength to care for him. Now, shall we get these supplies to your son?" Lillian reluctantly agreed, recognizing the practical necessity of accepting his help. Outside the store, Owen whistled softly, and a magnificent palomino trotted over from the hitching post. "This is Sundance," Owen said, patting the horse's neck. "He'll get us there quickly." With surprising gentleness, Owen helped Lillian mount before handing her the basket of supplies and swinging up behind her. The closeness made her uncomfortable at first. It had been so long since she'd been near a man, but the horse's steady gait and the urgent need to get back to Timothy soon pushed such thoughts from her mind. As they rode, Lillian directed him toward her small homestead. "May I ask what brings you to Fort McDowell, Mr. Archer?" "Just passing through," he replied after a moment's hesitation. "I worked cattle drives between Texas and Kansas for years. Thought I might try my hand at something different in Arizona territory." "There's not much opportunity around these parts," Lillian warned. "The silver mines are petering out and the farmers struggle with the climate." "I've learned to make do," he said simply. When they arrived at the cabin, Lillian's anxiety about Timothy surged anew. She quickly dismounted with Owen's help and hurried inside, basket in hand. The cabin was small, just one main room with a separated sleeping area. A fire had died down to embers in the small stone fireplace, and Timothy lay on the narrow bed, his face flushed with fever. "Timothy, sweetheart," Lillian called softly, setting down the basket and rushing to his side. The boy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. "Mama," he rasped, then began coughing violently. Lillian quickly measured out a spoonful of the fever tonic, lifting Timothy's head gently to help him swallow it. "This will help you feel better, my brave boy." Owen had remained respectfully by the door, hat in hand, but now he moved to the fireplace and began adding kindling from the small pile beside it. "You don't need to do that," Lillian protested. "The cabin's too cool for a sick child," he replied, not pausing in his work. "And you'll need hot water for broth." Lillian couldn't argue with his logic. As the fire blazed to life, she prepared a simple broth using the dried meat and a few of the vegetables Mr. Henderson had included in the basket. The aroma soon filled the small cabin, and Timothy stirred on his bed. "Smells good, Mama," he whispered, his voice slightly stronger. "It'll be ready soon, love." Lillian's heart lifted at this small sign of improvement. Owen busied himself bringing in more firewood from the meager pile outside, then checked on Sundance, who was contentedly grazing near the cabin. When he returned, Lillian had managed to get Timothy to eat a small amount of broth. The boy eyed the stranger curiously. "Are you a real cowboy?" Timothy asked, his voice weak but interested. Owen smiled for the first time since Lillian had met him, revealing a warmth that transformed his weathered face. "I sure am, young man. Been riding the trails for nearly 20 years now. Do you have a gun and a horse?" Timothy's eyes widened despite his illness. "I do." "That's my horse Sundance outside. Maybe when you're feeling better, I can show him to you." Timothy nodded eagerly before another coughing fit overtook him. Lillian quickly tended to him, and when she looked up, she found Owen watching them with an unreadable expression. "I should be going," he said abruptly. "Let you both get some rest." "Your shirts," Lillian remembered. "Let me have them so I can start mending." Owen hesitated, then shook his head. "Keep the supplies as a gift, Mrs. Graves. I'll stop by tomorrow to check on the boy if that's all right." Before she could protest further, he was out the door. Lillian watched through the window as he mounted Sundance and rode away, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. That night, as Timothy slept more peacefully than he had in days, Lillian found herself thinking about the mysterious cowboy with the kind eyes who had appeared just when they needed help most. When Owen returned the next afternoon, he brought more firewood strapped to Sundance's saddle. Timothy was sitting up in bed, still feverish but alert enough to wave excitedly when the cowboy entered. "Mr. Cowboy," the boy called. "His name is Mr. Archer," Lillian corrected gently. "Owen is fine," he said, setting down the firewood. From his saddlebags he produced a small wooden horse, clearly whittled by hand. "Thought you might like this, Timothy." The boy's face lit up as he accepted the gift. "It looks just like Sundance. Did you make it?" Owen nodded. "Spent some time on it last night at the boarding house." Lillian watched the interaction with mixed emotions. The cowboy's kindness was touching, but experience had taught her to be wary of men's intentions. Still, there was something genuine about Owen Archer that made her want to trust him. "How is he today?" Owen asked Lillian quietly as Timothy examined his new toy. "The fever's coming down, I think. The medicine has helped with the coughing too." Owen nodded, satisfied. "Good. I spoke with Doc Simmons in town. He said if the boy's not improving by tomorrow, he'll ride out to check on him." "You didn't need to do that," Lillian said, though gratitude welled within her. "Didn't mind." Owen's eyes met hers briefly before looking away. "I should help you with that woodpile. Won't last more than another day or two at this rate." Over the next week, Owen fell into a pattern of visiting daily. He chopped firewood, repaired the leaky roof that had plagued Lillian all winter, and even managed to fix the broken wheel on her husband's old wheelbarrow. Timothy grew stronger each day, his illness gradually releasing its hold on him. The boy had taken a shine to Owen, eagerly awaiting his visits and listening wide-eyed to carefully edited tales of cattle drives and frontier adventures. Lillian found herself looking forward to Owen's visits as well, though she tried to maintain a proper distance. Yet something about the quiet cowboy had begun to thaw the walls of ice she'd built around her heart since Thomas's death. On the 10th day, with Timothy well enough to play outside for short periods, Lillian finally confronted Owen as he split logs behind the cabin. "Mr. Archer," she began, clasping her hands tightly. "I appreciate everything you've done for us. Truly I do. But I need to understand why you're helping us. We're strangers to you." Owen paused, the axe held loosely in his hand. He seemed to consider his words carefully before speaking. "My mother raised 3 boys alone after my father was killed in a dispute over cattle. We nearly starved that first winter." His voice was steady, but Lillian could hear the pain of old memories. A neighbor helped us through, taught me and my brothers to hunt to work the land. Without him, we wouldn't have survived." He resumed splitting wood, the axe coming down with precise force. "I've been riding from place to place most of my adult life, Mrs. Graves. Never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. But I've never forgotten that neighbor's kindness. Figure the least I can do is pass it along when I see someone in need." Lillian absorbed his words, finding sincerity in them that resonated with her own experiences of hardship and unexpected kindness. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "And please call me Lillian." Owen nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Lillian it is, then." That evening, she insisted he stay for supper, a hearty stew made with the supplies he had provided. As they ate, Timothy chattered away, his strength visibly returning with each passing day. The small cabin felt warmer, more like a home than it had since Thomas died. After Timothy was tucked in bed, Lillian and Owen sat by the fire, the comfortable silence between them occasionally broken by conversation about the town, the weather, neutral topics that carefully avoided personal histories or future plans. "Will you be moving on soon?" Lillian finally asked, voicing the question that had been weighing on her mind. Owen stared into the fire. "I've been thinking about that. Fort McDowell seems like a decent place. The Army presence keeps things relatively peaceful, and there's work for a man willing to do it." Hope flickered in Lillian's heart, though she tried to suppress it. "What sort of work are you looking for?" "I heard Jenkins over at the livery stable is looking to sell out. He's getting too old for the work." Owen's fingers tapped thoughtfully against his knee. "I've saved a fair amount over the years, never had much to spend it on out on the trail." "You're considering buying the livery?" Lillian couldn't hide her surprise. Owen Archer had struck her as a drifter, not a man looking to settle down. "Just thinking about it." His blue eyes met hers briefly. "Might be nice to wake up in the same place for a change." The following day, Owen didn't appear at his usual time. Lillian tried not to feel disappointed as she went about her chores, telling herself it was better this way. Getting attached to a cowboy, a man who had lived his entire adult life on the move, would only lead to heartache. By mid-afternoon, Timothy had asked about Owen at least a dozen times, his disappointment obvious. Lillian was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her heart quickened despite her best efforts to remain indifferent. But when she turned, it wasn't Owen on Sundance who approached, but a stranger on a dark horse, leading another horse behind him. "Mrs. Graves," the man called as he drew closer. "Name's Hank Watson. I work over at the livery with Jenkins." "Yes, Mr. Watson," Lillian replied, puzzled by his appearance at her home. "Got a message for you from Owen Archer. He asked me to tell you he had some unexpected business to attend to in town." Hank glanced at the horse he was leading, a gentle-looking bay mare. "He also asked me to leave this horse with you, said you might have use for it getting into town and such." Lillian stared at the mare in disbelief. "There must be some mistake. I can't accept a horse." Hank shrugged. "Already been paid for, madam. Owen was right particular that you should have her. Said her name is Daisy and she's gentle as they come." He handed over the reins. "Oh, and there's this too." He passed her a small canvas bag that jingled with the unmistakable sound of coins. "What is this?" Lillian asked, reluctantly taking the bag. "Don't rightly know, madam. Owen just said you'd be needing it." After Hank departed, Lillian opened the bag to find a substantial amount of money inside, along with a hastily scrawled note. "For Timothy's future schooling. No arguments. Owe." Confusion and concern battled within her. Why would Owen send these gifts instead of delivering them himself? It felt too much like a farewell, and the thought created an unexpected ache in her chest. Timothy was delighted with Daisy, though Lillian explained they were just watching her for Mr. Archer. The boy was convinced he could ride her immediately, and it took all of Lillian's persuasion to convince him that he needed to regain more strength first. 2 days passed with no word from Owen. Lillian finally decided to ride into town on Daisy, both to inquire after Owen and to return the money he had sent. The mare proved to be as gentle as promised, plodding patiently toward Fort McDowell with Timothy seated in front of Lillian, chattering excitedly about his first real ride. Their first stop was Jenkins' livery stable, where they found the old man shoeing a horse in the yard. "Mrs. Graves," Jenkins nodded respectfully. "Young Timothy, good to see you up and about, boy." "We're looking for Mr. Archer," Lillian said. "Is he here?" Jenkins' weathered face creased with concern. "Haven't seen him since day before yesterday when he sold me Sundance. Fine horse, that one." Lillian felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "He sold Sundance, but he loves that horse. Said he needed the money quick-like, didn't say what for." Jenkins scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Strange thing is, he didn't take near what the horse was worth. I told him so, but he said it was fair." A sick feeling settled in Lillian's stomach. "Do you know where he went?" "Can't say for sure. Might try the boarding house on Pine Street. Mrs. Elliott runs it." With Timothy still chattering about wanting to see Owen's horse, Lillian made her way to the boarding house, a neat 2-story building with a small front porch. Mrs. Elliott, a plump woman with sharp eyes, answered the door. "Mr. Archer." "Oh my, haven't you heard, Mrs. Elliott's expression turned sympathetic. "He's at Doc Simmons' place. Been there since the night before last. Terrible fever, they say. Same kind that's been going around." Lillian's heart sank. Is he going to be all right? Hard to say. Doc's doing his best, but Mr. Archer was in a bad way when they brought him in. Collapsed right outside the general store. Mrs. Elliott shook her head. "Such a shame. Seemed like a good man." Thanking Mrs. Elliott, Lillian hurried toward the doctor's office, Timothy in tow. Her mind raced with the implications of what she'd learned. Owen had sold his beloved horse likely for far less than its worth, and then sent the money to her for Timothy's education. All while he himself was falling ill. Doc Simmons' office was a small building near the center of town. The doctor himself opened the door, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose and his white hair disheveled. "Mrs. Graves," he said, recognizing her immediately. "I wondered when you'd come." "How is he?" Lillian asked without preamble. The doctor sighed. "Touch and go. The fever's high, and he's developed a nasty cough, similar to what your boy had but more severe. Being on the trail for years takes a toll on a man's constitution." "May we see him?" Doc Simmons hesitated, looking at Timothy. "The boy shouldn't be exposed. I already had the fever," Timothy piped up. "Mama says that means I won't get it again right away." The doctor smiled tiredly. "Smart lad. All right, but just for a few minutes. He needs rest." He led them to a small back room where Owen lay on a narrow bed. Lillian barely recognized him at first. His face was flushed with fever, his eyes closed, his breathing labored. Without his usual strength and composure, he looked vulnerable in a way that made her heart ache. "Owen," she said softly, approaching the bedside. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Timothy stood on tiptoe to see. "Is Mr. Owen going to die?" he whispered. "No, sweetheart," Lillian answered firmly, though fear clutched at her heart. "He's just very sick like you were. He needs medicine and rest." Doc Simmons pulled her aside while Timothy continued to watch Owen with worried eyes. "Mrs. Graves, I should tell you Mr. Archer has been asking for you in his more lucid moments." The doctor's voice was low. "And he made it clear that if anything happens to him, everything he has goes to you and the boy." Lillian stared at the doctor in disbelief. That's not possible. We barely know each other." Nevertheless, he was quite insistent, made me write it down and sign as witness." Doc Simmons adjusted his spectacles. "Not that he has much, just what was in his saddlebags and whatever's left from the sale of his horse after paying for his care." Tears welled in Lillian's eyes. "He sold his horse to help us. And now he's sick, perhaps dying, with no one to care for him properly." A determination she hadn't felt since Thomas's death settled over her. "Doctor, I'm taking him home with me. Mrs. Graves, I don't think. I nursed Timothy through this same illness. I know what to do." Her voice brooked no argument. "Besides, he'll recover better in a home than in this sick room." Doc Simmons studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You may be right, but how will you transport him? He's in no condition to ride." "Jenkins might lend us his wagon," Lillian said, already working through the logistics. "We'll make a pallet in the back." By sunset, with the help of several townspeople who had come to respect Owen during his short time in Fort McDowell, they had him settled in the wagon with blankets protecting him from the cool evening air. Timothy rode Daisy alongside, prouder than Lillian had ever seen him, while she drove the wagon with Jenkins' steady old draft horse. The journey back to the cabin was slow and tense, with Lillian constantly checking on Owen. His fever seemed to worsen as night fell, and by the time they reached the cabin, she was deeply worried. It took all her strength, with Timothy helping as much as his small frame allowed, to get Owen inside and settled on her bed. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just weeks ago, he had come to the aid of her sick child, and now their roles were reversed. For 3 days and nights, Lillian barely slept as she tended to Owen. She bathed his forehead with cool cloths, spooned broth and medicine between his cracked lips, and held his hand through the worst of the fever dreams when he called out names she didn't recognize, perhaps family members long gone, or comrades from his years on the trail. Timothy proved to be a dedicated helper, fetching water and firewood, keeping Daisy fed and watered, and talking to Owen even when the cowboy couldn't respond. The boy seemed convinced that his chatter would help Owen recover, just as Owen's stories had helped him. On the 4th morning, Lillian woke with a start, realizing she had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed. Dawn light filtered through the cabin's single window, casting a golden glow across Owen's face. With a jolt of alarm, she noticed he was watching her, his blue eyes clear for the first time in days. "Owen," she whispered, leaning forward to place a hand on his forehead. The skin was cool and dry, the fever had broken. "Lillian," he replied, his voice hoarse but steady. "Where am I?" "My cabin. You've been very ill." Relief made her voice shake. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of longhorns." A weak smile touched his lips. "But I'm alive, which is more than I expected. Why didn't you tell me you were getting sick?" Lillian couldn't keep the accusation from her voice. "You were helping us while you were falling ill yourself." Owen's gaze drifted toward the window. "Didn't want to worry you. Timothy needed that medicine more than I did. And selling Sundance, sending us money." Lillian pressed, her emotions a tangle of gratitude and frustration. "Timothy's a bright boy. He should have a chance at schooling." Owen's eyes found hers again. "And you needed a horse. Isolated out here with a child, it's not safe without transportation." "That wasn't your responsibility," Lillian said softly. Owen was quiet for a moment. "Maybe I wanted it to be." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. "Mama." Timothy's sleepy voice came from his small bed in the corner. When he saw Owen awake, he bolted upright. "Mr. Owen, you're not dead." Despite his weakness, Owen chuckled. "Not yet, partner." Timothy scrambled over, climbing onto the bed with a lack of decorum that Lillian would normally have corrected. But seeing the joy on both faces, she held her tongue. I took care of Daisy just like you would take care of Sundance, Timothy announced proudly. And I helped Mama with the medicine and the cool cloths and everything. Sounds like you've been a real ranch hand, Owen said, his voice strengthening slightly. Thank you for helping your mama look after me. Over the next week, Owen regained his strength gradually. As soon as he could stand without assistance, he insisted on moving to the small lean-to attached to the cabin, refusing to displace Lillian from her bed any longer. She argued that he wasn't fully recovered, but his stubborn streak matched her own. During his convalescence, Lillian learned more about Owen Archer than she had in all the previous weeks. Born in Missouri, he had lost his father at 12, and as the oldest son, had shouldered much of the responsibility for his family's survival. At 17, he'd signed on with a cattle outfit heading to Texas, and had been riding the trails ever since, sending money home when he could until his mother passed 5 years ago. His brothers had both settled in California, one a blacksmith and the other a shopkeeper. Why didn't you ever settle down yourself? Lillian asked one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching Timothy chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Owen considered the question. Never found a reason compelling enough, I suppose. The trail becomes a habit after a while, moving with the seasons, answering to no one but yourself and whatever outfits hired you. And now, Lillian kept her tone casual though her heart beat faster. Now I'm thinking there might be more to life than watching it pass by from the back of a horse. His eyes met hers briefly before returning to Timothy. Jenkins is still willing to sell the livery, says he's been waiting for someone who knows horses to take it over. Are you considering it seriously then? Owen nodded. I am. Fort McDowell's growing. The Army contract alone would provide steady business, and there's always travelers needing their horses tended or reshod. Hope bloomed in Lillian's chest, though she tried to temper it with caution. It would be a big change from the freedom of the trail. Some kinds of freedom are overrated, Owen said quietly. And some responsibilities bring their own kind of freedom. As April turned to May, Owen recovered fully and returned to town to finalize the purchase of Jenkins' livery stable. The old man was delighted to hand over his business to someone who respected horses the way Owen did, and the transition was smooth. Owen found lodging in rooms above the stable, though he rode out to Lillian's cabin several times a week. Their relationship developed slowly, cautiously. Lillian had been badly hurt by loss, and Owen had never allowed himself to form attachments that couldn't be broken at a moment's notice. Yet with each visit, each shared meal, each evening spent talking on the porch while Timothy played or listened to their stories, the connection between them deepened. By early summer, Owen had become a fixture in their lives. He taught Timothy to ride Daisy properly, built a sturdy corral beside the cabin, and even started a vegetable garden that promised to be far more successful than Lillian's previous attempts. Their conversations grew more personal, touching on hopes and fears they had shared with no one else. One warm evening in late June, with Timothy already asleep inside, Owen and Lillian sat side by side on the porch steps. The night was alive with the sounds of crickets and distant coyotes, the stars brilliant overhead. I've been thinking, Owen said after a comfortable silence. This cabin's pretty far from town. Makes it hard for Timothy to attend school come fall, Lillian sighed. I know, I've worried about that, but I can't afford a place in town, even with the sewing work I've been getting. What if, Owen paused, seeming to gather his courage. What if you and Timothy came to live in town? There's plenty of room above the livery. Jenkins built it for a family, though his wife passed before they had children. Lillian turned to look at him, her heart racing. Owen, "Are you asking? I'm asking if you'd consider becoming my wife," he said simply, meeting her gaze steadily. "I know it hasn't been long and I'm not a man of fancy words, but I love you, Lillian Graves. I love Timothy too, like he was my own son. I think we could build a good life together." Tears welled in Lillian's eyes. "Are you certain? The livery is just getting established." Taking on a wife and child, Owen reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I've never been more certain of anything. When I was lying in that sick, not sure if I'd live or die, all I could think about was you and Timothy. How much I wanted to be part of your lives, to protect you both, to watch that boy grow up strong and smart." He squeezed her hand. "I know I can't replace Thomas. Don't want to try. But I'd be honored if you'd allow me to be your husband and Timothy's father." Lillian's tears spilled over as years of loneliness and struggle gave way to the possibility of a different future. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Owen Archer." Their wedding took place in Fort McDowell's small church on a bright July morning. Timothy served as ring bearer, his face solemn with the importance of his task, until he reached the altar and broke into a wide grin. The townspeople who had come to respect both the determined widow and the quiet cowboy filled the pews, and even Doc Simmons remarked that he'd never seen a more fitting match. Lillian wore a new dress of pale blue calico, sewn with her own hands. Owen had splurged on a proper suit, though he looked slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire after years in trail clothes. When they spoke their vows, their voices were steady and sure, each word a promise they intended to keep. The small cabin where Lillian had struggled through widowhood was sold to a young family just arriving from the east. Owen and Lillian moved into the spacious rooms above the livery stable, which Lillian quickly transformed into a comfortable home with her skilled needle and eye for making the most of limited resources. Timothy started school in September, quickly proving himself an eager student. Owen taught him about horses in the afternoons, and the boy dreamed of one day taking over the livery business when Pa gets too old, a notion that made Owen laugh and ruffle his hair affectionately. The business flourished under Owen's careful management. His reputation for fair dealing and expertise with horses spread throughout the territory, bringing customers from as far away as Phoenix. Lillian established a small dressmaking business in a corner of their home, her fine needlework in high demand for special occasions. Winter came and went, and with spring's arrival, Lillian shared news that brought tears to Owen's eyes. They would welcome a new addition to their family by autumn. Timothy was delighted at the prospect of becoming a big brother, already planning all the things he would teach the baby about horses and reading and everything else he knew. On a crisp October evening in 1879, Elizabeth Archer entered the world with a lusty cry that Doc Simmons declared showed promising spirit. Owen held his daughter with trembling hands, marveling at her tiny fingers and the dusting of dark hair that matched his own. "She's perfect," he whispered to an exhausted but radiant Lillian, "just like her mother." Timothy peered at his sister with a mixture of awe and protectiveness. "She's awfully small," he observed, "but I'll help take care of her, Mama, I promise." "I know you will, sweetheart," Lillian smiled, watching her family with a heart so full it felt it might burst. Later that night, with Elizabeth sleeping soundly in her cradle, and Timothy finally persuaded to go to bed after multiple trips to check on his new sister, Owen sat beside Lillian's bed, holding her hand. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted quietly. "A family, a home, a purpose beyond the next trail or paycheck." "Nor did I after Thomas died," Lillian replied. "I thought that part of my life was over." Owen brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Do you remember that day in Henderson's store? When you were asking for work to buy bread for Timothy, Lillian nodded. I was so desperate. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just sold a horse I'd been breaking for a rancher outside of town, Owen said. Had the money in my pocket, was planning to move on the next day. Just stopping for supplies before heading south to Tucson. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Then I saw you standing there, proud even in your need, and something just clicked into place. Like I'd been waiting my whole life to be in exactly that spot at exactly that moment. Tears slipped down Lillian's cheeks at the simple, heartfelt confession. God works in mysterious ways, she whispered. That he does. Owen leaned forward to kiss her gently. Get some rest. I'll watch over Elizabeth. As the years passed, the Archer family became a cornerstone of the Fort McDowell community. The livery stable expanded to include a carriage service, and Owen's reputation as a horse trader and trainer spread throughout the territory. Lillian's dressmaking business grew into a proper shop on Main Street, employing 3 seamstresses. Timothy, tall and serious like his stepfather, excelled in school and eventually attended the Territorial University in Tucson, returning with a law degree to become Fort McDowell's first proper attorney. Elizabeth, with her father's dark hair and her mother's determined spirit, developed a gift for numbers that made her invaluable in managing the family businesses as they grew. 2 more children joined the family, James in 1882, and Sarah in 1885, completing the home that had begun with an act of kindness in a general store. The cabin where Owen had once nursed Timothy through fever, and where Lillian had later done the same for Owen, became a story told and retold to the children, and eventually grandchildren, a testament to how lives can change when compassion meets courage. In 1903, on their 25th wedding anniversary, Owen and Lillian returned to that spot where the cabin had once stood. The structure itself was long gone, replaced by a more substantial home built by subsequent owners, but the view of the mountains remained unchanged. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped in Fort McDowell that day? Lillian asked, her hand still fitting perfectly in his despite the passing years. Owen shook his head. No point in wondering about roads not taken. But I do thank God every day that I chose the one that led me to you and Timothy. Lillian leaned her head against his shoulder, content in the knowledge that the desperate young widow and the wandering cowboy had found in each other exactly what they needed, not just bread for a hungry child, but sustenance for lonely hearts that had found their home at last.